Many believe that artificial intelligence has brought us to the edge of a new frontier, and that AI will optimize every sector in ways we couldn't have imagined even a decade ago. How are AI-driven technologies advancing core businesses, even in long-established industries? How can AI businesses be scaled efficiently? With technology moving at such breakneck speed, it's imperative that we tackle the ethical considerations head-on. Globally, 38% of people feel that their country needs to do more to mitigate AI-related risks. And slightly more say that their countries aren't making enough progress in regulations and restrictions on AI tools. Public and private sector coalitions around the world are convening to align on AI governance issues, ranging from ethics and data to intellectual property rights. Is it possible to align on an industry, regional, or global level? The surge in AI technology presents substantial investment opportunities alongside inherent risks. How do investors plan to navigate the challenges posed by the AI tech boom? Welcome to FII Priority Summit's AI Town Hall.
Thank you so much. And as you look at that video there, just a little flavor in terms of what people are thinking about AI. And you can hear it is very much the theme of this entire event, actually. Everybody we've talked to is putting it up there as a priority. It doesn't matter what segment. Everybody's looking at this and saying we really, really need to be on top of this. In fact, we probably all need to get ahead of it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a town hall gathering for the rest of the afternoon, just before we really, bring our whole evening together for a close. And we have some tremendous experts here that I really want you also to engage with. So please be listening and be ready for questions. This time I promise we will have plenty of time, and I'll be down there with you to make sure that we can get your opinions and just get your questions this time. Opinions we'll save you for the panel for next year, okay? So promise me, questions only, and very direct questions. I'll appreciate it. We have 3 sessions in this, so we really have a tremendous list of, influencers in this sector. I mean, real life influencers. We're looking at industry. We're also looking at investment, and then we're looking at alignment. So we're really breaking down AI into these areas the way you can get a very, very close look at what's going on. So let's get started on this. We have lots of people to hear from. And just to get us started, my dear colleague, we're going to dual moderate this one. So I want you to give a very, very warm welcome to Saif Ishouf, who is with me here. And he's our co-moderator here, my partner for this whole session. He'll stay here. I'll be in the floor. We'll be back and forth, and we'll be with you the whole way through.
Thanks so much, Etna. Let's give it up a round of applause for Etna. What an extraordinary job she's been doing today. So is everyone ready for our AI town hall? We're in Miami. We need a little bit more energy than that. We put the AI in it. Is everyone ready for this? Great. So our town hall this afternoon begins with 2 esteemed speakers. First up, please join me in welcoming Adrian Aoun, who is the CEO of Forward. Let's give it up for Adrian. And we also have Amir Husain, who's the founder and CEO of SparkCognition. Let's give it up for Amir. Welcome, gentlemen. We're so excited to begin this conversation in our AI town hall, and what better place to start than industry and healthcare? And I wanted to start with you, Adrian, and let's just jump right into it. You're building, and you've built something extraordinary. What do you actually need to scale your operations right now?
Yeah, so what we're doing here at Forward is we're working on building a healthcare system that's based on AI rather than just based on doctors. When you think about going after that, there's usually 3 things that you have to incorporate in AI. You have to incorporate data, you have to incorporate algorithms, and you have to incorporate compute. Now, the reality is that compute these days, you can kind of buy it off the shelf. It's from NVIDIA, et cetera. And the algorithms, well, the good news is companies like Google have open sourced those algorithms, so roughly everybody's using the same math. But the data is the key part. If you truly want a world of AI healthcare, at some point you have to collect the data. Now, it's easy to think in healthcare, whatever, everybody's got data. There's people like Kaiser that have tons of data, but it's all the wrong data. Kaiser doesn't know what's happening to you right now. In fact, almost nobody does. And so what we started with at Forward is let's let's collect as much information as we can about somebody, and let's follow them over time. So we can start to train algorithms to try little things here and there, and just say, do these interventions actually work? And if they start to work, now we can start to get to a world where the AI is truly developing the science, not just giving suggestions of the past.
I want to jump in on a topic before we bring Amir in and ask you, Adrian, how are you thinking about privacy and security in what you're building? Because we know in the United States, there's HIPAA. Obviously, this is one of those areas, highly regulated. Share some insight with us on that.
So the first thing I'm going to say, and I hope this doesn't end up in the journal, but the reality is that we all think our healthcare data is particularly valuable and it should be super private. Nobody gives a shit about your rash. I swear, really, hackers are trying to break into your bank accounts. They're not trying to break into your health records. And the reality is we give up our data every single day for stupid things like tagging photos on Facebook. Here you have an opportunity to give your data up to literally live a longer life. What could be more valuable than that?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And Amir, you are not only a CEO and a founder, but also a published author on this very topic, going a long way back. And SparkCognition, the company that you founded, I'd love for you to share a little bit of perspective, because you all are working with business partners in huge industries like oil and gas that play a critical role in the global economy. And I'm curious for you to share with our crowd today, what is SparkCognition's underlying AI technology solving for or actually accelerating? And kind of follow on, why does it matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. 10 years ago, when I started SparkCognition, what I thought was that AI was being used a lot for consumer use cases, promoting a video on Netflix, getting more clicks on an ad. But what really interested me was making AI do useful things in the real world. And if you look at global infrastructure, there's roughly about $100 trillion worth of global infrastructure out there. Most of this cannot be ripped and replaced. It's just such a huge capital commitment that you cannot rip and replace it. But at the same time, we have so many pressures on this infrastructure. The population is increasing in many parts of the world. There's a knowledge gap. Many knowledgeable people that were maintaining, let's say, the US grid are leaving that line of work. So there's an increasing knowledge gap, which makes maintenance a problem. There's now cyber threats. There's all sorts of issues around having the same capital expense, but wanting to improve production. So you look at all of this and you say, well, how the heck is $100 trillion worth of infrastructure going to solve all these problems for the development and the safety, the security, the economic well-being of the world without some help? And in my view, the best form of that help is this virtual fabric of artificial intelligence that can be layered on top of our infrastructure. Clearly, if we're putting in some new projects, we can build the AI into the system. But there are ways also to just layer on AI on top of existing systems and improve their efficiency, predict failures before they happen, even optimize large asset bases, like, let's say, a wind farm or a solar farm, and get more from them. So this, I think, is critical. And you asked, why does it matter? In my view, it matters because plenty matters. What I mean by that is that scarcity is what causes half the troubles on Earth. And infrastructure is what differentiates us from our ancient past, where we were mainly dealing with scarcity, to a present which can provide enough for us if we manage it well. So in many ways, what we're doing at SparkCognition, I think, is possibly one of the most important things technology should be used for now, period, across the board, which is to amplify what we have already invested in and to create plenty for the people of the world. And I don't mean this as just words. It's a power plant that can produce more electricity. It's an oil and gas infrastructure that can produce more without having environmental consequences. It's literally things like that. So I think it matters more than almost anything else I can think of.
Amir, I'm so glad that you shared that. And this particular FII, and Aetna is out there, the theme is impact on humanity, and you touched upon that. I want to just sort of dig in one more layer with you on talking, maybe it's a not so great word, but talking about doomsday scenarios. And I'm curious, in your perspective, what is the doomsday scenario or data point that raises your risk alarm for manufacturing in sectors like big oil and gas industries?
I'll take the counterpoint here because many people imagine the disaster or the doomsday scenario as being AI takes control, AI does something on its own, makes things blow up, etc. About almost a decade ago, I wrote a book called Hyperwar with General John Allen, who's a 4-star Marine commander, and we imagined the application of artificial intelligence in the field of battle. What we determined was that the use of AI at these macro scales is subject to game theory. In other words, if you have a competitor that can access this technology to create an advantage, but you're not sure whether they'll do it, you will have to do it, because by the time you find out that the competitor has implemented that functionality and now you're at loggerheads, it'll be too late. Now, this
Amir, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to bring in one of the best things about this town hall is that we have, it's like we're sequencing different folks that are coming in. And so next up, I'd like to introduce to our panel an expert on AI, banking, and finance. So please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Caroline Arnold, who is Executive Vice President, Chief Data Officer, and Chief Information Officer at State Street Global Markets and Corporate Systems. Welcome, Caroline.
Hi, sir.
Well, you've already heard the first part of our conversation, and we want to jump right in with you in the work that you're helping to lead at State Street. And what is State Street's history with AI?
Well, actually, we have a long history with AI, but what I think is interesting is the term AI goes back to 1956. And actually, in every decade, there's been a lot of acceleration. The acceleration and the big buzz we hear now is really due to data, the ability to get a lot of data, different types of data in one place, and to compute it very effectively. And of course, cloud plays into that. And we were very early adopters of using AI to benefit our clients and to make sure that we were running the very best organization we could. So across all the areas, whether it's efficiency, whether it's risk, surveilling our environment, whether it's detecting fraud, we have been early adopters of these technologies, and in the value creation space too. So one thing I think is fascinating is the research sites at State Street are very AI-driven. So there are 1.8 macro indicators that are calculated through models, 1.8 million every single day, that are followed globally by many investors and used in their scenarios. That site uses sentiment analysis of social media and digital news to create recommendations and to understand the sentiment of the market. And now we're putting Gen AI chatbots on top of that to allow people to interact with that data much more effectively. We have an alpha data platform, which is really about allowing our clients to drive insights from their own data and to get the most out of their own data that they might not have been able to put together in one place. And it has a co-pilot coming out, which allows you, again, to interact much more effectively with your own data, visualize it, create scenarios, et cetera. So long history and now really accelerating.
Quick follow-up. What does responsible AI look like for you all at State Street?
That's a great question. I mean, look, I think every generation has faced a new technology, and with it comes a lot of excitement and doubt and even dread. And I think the most important thing is to understand your purpose and what your purpose is to organize your team. You talked about the impact on humanity. How do people transition to the new world? Through purpose. Our purpose is to create better outcomes for the world's investors and the people they serve. And we want to couch that in ethics, so everything is fair, and to avoid bias, to accountability, governance and controls, the fact that we can explain what we do, that it's transparent. All these are very important pillars to us. And one thing that is true about being a global bank that is one of the systemically important banks is you already have sort of a superstructure for making sure you're doing things in the right way because of the regulatory burden. So we feel that in addition to the innovation, we are very well coupled with a trusted pair of hands for that. So we feel that comes together very well for us.
I appreciate your mention of something like algorithmic bias. We heard earlier this morning from a leader like Steve Schwartzman talking about the concern factors. And in your work at State Street, I'd love for you to illuminate for us What work and how are you harnessing AI to better protect your clients?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, we have a very healthy risk function powered largely by, so we have risk, we have compliance, we have cyber. All of these functions consume very large amounts of data and use models and machine learning and other algorithms to see if they can spot outliers, anomalies, bad actors, fraud. I think it gets increasingly difficult in a world with generated content, right? And I think that's where we really have to go. So how do we actually make sure that our environment can spot what will be all the new areas of fraud? I'm definitely working on that. But as I said, we have a superstructure already for protecting the environment, which is expanding all the time. A large part of it is cyber, and the same tools that allow us to create value, sadly, allow people to create new kinds of fraud and new kinds of deception that can be difficult for our clients and for any industry as a whole.
I appreciate you sharing those insights. And we said that this is an active AI town hall. And these panelists are going to be staying right here with us as we welcome onto the stage an individual who's going to share with us some additional insights. So now, to catch us up on the speed of AI-powered tech, ushering in change for aerospace, we have Anthony Baker, who's the CEO of SatView, who's on a mission to capture the highest resolution thermal data from space for a safer and more sustainable Earth. This, you have to see it to believe it. Anthony.
Thank you very much for the kind welcome and for the invite as a whole. I'm Anthony Baker, CEO and co-founder of SatView. And SatView is going to provide the highest resolution thermal imagery for a safer and more sustainable world. So we launched our first satellite last year on SpaceX. We have plans for 2 more next year, and then a constellation of satellites that will be able to come back to any place on Earth 1 or 2 hours, every 1 or 2 hours. So I'm going to tell you today how we use AI in the space sector, and also some vision of how we're going forward. So this picture you see here is of Yokoyama City, and it's in infrared, and it's at nighttime. So you wouldn't see this on Google Earth because it would be pitch black. But what you can see is industrial activity. We actually infer what's going on inside by looking at the outside thermal emissions. You can look at oil storage and refineries, power stations on their duty cycle, urban heat island effects. What's causing the city to be hotter than elsewhere? You've got emissions flowing into the ocean, which could be pollution, etc. So from one image, there's multiple applications. If we zoom in on one particular site here, this is the Yokoyama power station. If you look at Google Earth, you see 8 buildings there, which are where the turbines are stored. In thermal, you can see which ones are on and which ones are off. So why is that important? If this is coal-powered or gas-powered, you could have an estimate of the consumption of that fossil fuel. If you look at the outputs, you could do some arbitrage between what is the energy mix between sustainable and this fossil fuel outputs. Or if you want to count carbon, we know how much carbon each one of those turbines produces, and if we know the duty cycle, we can estimate and we can verify what the company might be reporting anywhere in the world. This could be in China, it could be anywhere else in the world. So here's another image. So we got on the left, we've got a Google image of Waris refinery in UAE, and on the right, you see it in thermal. What does this tell you? So on the sort of the left of the picture, you can see flares. In the middle, you can see industrial activity. So bits of the plant are on and off. And on the far right, you can see some pollution going into the oceans. Who's interested in this? Well, if this was on having downtime, and you wanted to know when it was coming back online, from what's being tested, we could tell you when this power station is going to be back online. From what's hot and what's cold, we can probably tell you what they're making this week. So this is a much earlier data insight and transparent across the world than's been previously available. And so this is the new must-have data set for industrial monitoring. AI, the problem with our unique data, which we have the IP for, is trying to match it to real-world images, because it's not obvious where the one-to-one connection is. So pixel by pixel, we have to match this with a known standard. AI can do that automatically in seconds, and all the data we collect globally can be integrated with AI. Here's another example. This is a solar farm. And in optical, you can barely make it out. But in infrared, you immediately can see there's a contrast on the panels. And this is the failed panels. So quite often with solar farms, they know in aggregate that the yield's down, but they don't know exactly which panels have failed and which ones are not. So we trained an AI algorithm on what a failed panel would look like. We didn't have to tell it what a farm looked like or what the sun reflection might look like. It automatically could produce a yield figure from the thermal image. And this technique can be applied to many, many different industries. If we looked at the built environment, we could tell you where in the world we're wasting energy, which buildings might need refurbishing, etc. So where's AI going? You can imagine an app or a chat box telling you everything you do, what's green and what's not, verified from space data with AI analytics. AI is already, in some ways, in space already. There's computers and GPUs in space, but that's going to intensify to make the insights faster in space. And then finally, if you have offsets, you have your industry which might be polluting, and you buy offsets, and it might be a forest. What terrifies you is that forest is on fire. So with our data, we can immediately see the course and the speed of the fire, alert the first responders. We can process this on board the satellite, so it goes straight down to the first responder's cell phone and tells them how to tackle it. And so we're going to see in the future more and more of these effects. And I think that the future is very bright in integrating AI to scale the problem, to make it translate space data, which is quite hard, into everyday applications that everyone can use at home and in business. So I'm happy to talk more about this and collaborate on solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. So Anthony's going to join our panel, and next up, we have our last speaker, who's going to be joining us for the AI industry panel, is a real visionary when it comes to AI infrastructure. Your networking elements and data centers, just a few of the critical elements to deploying some of the AI products that our panelists here have discussed. Please join me in welcoming Paddy Padmanathan, chairman of DataVolt, to the hot seat. Paddy.
Hi. Thank you.
Paddy, welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
And you're in the hot seat now. And the question for you, sir, is what unique AI-driven technologies is DataVolt using, and how does it work?
So DataVolt is looking at building the next generation of data centers that will be much larger to deal with artificial intelligence, large language models, and the quantum computing, which is coming right behind us. These are going to consume X times more, everybody's guessing, 3, 4, 5, 10 times more energy than the data centers of today. And quite a lot of that energy is being used at the moment in a very unstructured way. So one of the first things that we're looking at is how we use AI to reduce energy intensity by optimizing the supply of energy into the data centers in order to follow the load. Everybody thinks that the data center is just, you just shove electricity in and it just sort of runs. It's much more, in the sort of real world, we use electricity a lot during the day, and then when we go back and cook at night, so it's much more predictable load curve. In a data center, it's much more erratic by minutes as the computing power kicks in, kicks out, more data comes in. So you can use the artificial intelligence to start looking at how to optimize that power input, thereby starting to reduce energy intensity of the data centers, thereby also starting to reduce the cooling demand. That's the other huge consumption of energy in data centers. So those are the immediate sort of two areas that we see, and also subsequently to then optimize the design itself, the security environment. Huge amount of opportunity that is only now we're starting to look at.
What I love about your own background, having been a leader in large-scale energy power systems, is that having someone like you at DataVolt leading the charge in this regard. I'd love for you to give us some perspective, particularly around what are the AI solutions to protect client systems, because at the end of the day, those are the things that stakeholders are most curious about.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Clients are most interested in making sure that, first of all, uptime, making sure that they're reliably being served. And again, by making sure that we are able to follow the load demand in real time, uptime, that's one of the things that we can use artificial intelligence to increase the service that is being provided through the data centers. And by distributing the data centers much more, and by increasing the size of the campuses so that we can make it much, much more efficient. Everybody talks about data centers. It's actually their power centers. It's data together with, so far we have not thought about the power because we were able to just plug it into the utility because the power consumption was not that significant. Today, as the world is starting to use electricity for more and more things, industry is electrifying, transportation is electrifying, and at the same time now, we've increased the scale of the electricity demand through the data centers. Huge, huge challenge. I think you've got everybody now starting to say that, in fact, countries are starting to suspend the construction of new data centers. Singapore, Netherlands, because they can't cope with the power demand. They don't have the power supply. So it's all about power.
So I know that there are a lot of questions that are bubbling in the audience, and Etna in a few minutes is going to be jumping to that. But this FII is all about impact in humanity. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the question, what progress have you made to date against industry benchmarks in resource consumption, environmental impact, emissions, et cetera?
So coming from the company that I led for 18 years, Aquapower, where we started to put renewable energy reliably 24 hours a day, we have shown that in certain places where the resource is available, we are able to supply renewable energy very stably and to follow the load demand. So as we go into the data center, from get-go, the first at-scale data centers that we are looking at developing, we are starting to develop, 100% renewable energy. No sort of green, no sort of, yeah, they will be grid connected. That's because what the clients need for security. But we can show that we can deliver reliably without relying on non-green supply, entirely green. So that's a huge, huge impact on carbon emissions and making sure from day one that we pretty much eliminate carbon emissions from the data center consumption.
Thank you so much, Patty. We're going to jump now. Etna, do we have some questions from out in the crowd?
We have time for this session just to have one question. And I got Raz here. It's his lucky day. But we will have a big investment panel in just a moment. The guys with all the money, so make sure you're ready to ask them pointed questions. We will make a little bit more time. Raz, take it away and direct question to possibly one of our guys because we don't have time to involve everybody.
Sure.
Walk in there like that, like a rock star.
Yes, hi. This is a question for Anthony at SatView. So you mentioned being able to detect, let's say, forest fire and things of that nature within an hour. When do you think, or how soon do you think that'll be implemented? Because we do have, in North America, we do have a crisis when it comes to forest fire and things of that nature.
So I think it's a combination of different technologies. There's early warning systems which can detect a lightning strike. So we've been working with that company to zoom in on where that strike is and to see if it's caused a fire. So we alert things earlier on. There's other detection systems which are maybe government-based, which can look at a very wide area. We're using our technology to zoom in to the fire front and see its course and speed, because it's actually a video camera we have on board. And that is very helpful for the first responders to be able to positioned in the right place. They don't want to be standing in front of it. They want to be standing from the sides and dealing with it. So we're available. We'll have 2 satellites up operational next year. Yeah, we're working with all those partners this year to book the capacity.
So before we close out this industry panel, and I want to say the industry experts are actually still going to be with us in the crowd up front in a minute when we transition to the investment session. I want to ask, do we have one call? Does anyone here want to answer this question? Do you have one call to action or question for the investment community as it relates to AI technology in your industry? Please.
So I think there's an opportunity now. Whenever you look at like the course of history, history doesn't happen linearly so much as it happens at these kind of big inflection points. And right now, with the technologies we have around AI kind of pervading almost every single industry, I think we need to stop accepting incrementalism and start demanding true order of magnitude change. I work in healthcare, and we sit there and we say, can we live 1 year longer? Can we live 2 years longer? But why aren't we asking, can we live 100 years longer or 1,000 years longer? I know that sounds ridiculous, but then again, think about where we were just 1,000 years ago or before that. And so I think that the thing I'd ask of the investment community is to just think bigger and demand more.
Yeah, I think I would say, you know, in the end, there's so much buzz around it, but it's another tool. And the tool is only as good as the data that feeds it, the quality of the data and the lineage of that data and understanding it. And that in the end, you know, it is really the people that put this technology to work, and it requires wisdom, it requires skills that don't exist in the tool itself. So wisdom, experience, purposefulness, even empathy, and experience is a way to get the most out of this technology, and that we should be partnering in a way that increases the trust that that technology is being used in the most prudent way for the very best outcomes for the most people.
Amir, final word before we transition to our next session.
Yeah, I think private investors, I agree, should look for more, and they should look for genuine artificial intelligence capability as opposed to just take an existing application and layer on an LLM. I think that's really uninteresting, and money shouldn't be allocated to that. For government investors, the request is move faster. Our acquisition system is so broken, it's probably the largest national security threat to this country, more so than the Russians and the Chinese. So that would be my comment on the private and the public side.
Thank you so much to our industry panel. Let's give them a big round of applause. They're not going anywhere right now.
Your thing is
Etna?
so cool. I love your thing.
To move just a little bit. I'd love to have you all on stage, but that's it. There you go. Be happy down here, because what I really would like for all of you to do, too, I've got the investors on stage coming up now, so please, all of you, really be thinking, what do you want to hear from the investors? Saif, that was just so good. I think the insight that we got to there. So thank you all, and thank you for sharing what you said there. But a bigger national security threat than those other geopolitical issues. Yeah, we have to watch that one. I think be very careful about it. And again, I think I'll put to them, what about speed? What about wisdom, experience, empathy, trust? We're going to hopefully have that with our panel, and we'll get them out here very, very soon here. But I have 4 people coming out. And I'm a little short on seats. No,
I think we're Jack Kadar.
Jack is first. See, I'm miles ahead of myself. So there's no excuse for you not to have questions ready for us. Okay, so you're still taking this one away, Saif.
That's right.
It's another part for you.
That's right. So we're moving on into one more TED-style conversation. Please join us in welcoming Jack Hidari, CEO of Sandbox AQ, who will address how AI can and will transform your company's core business operations. Jack.
Be an X on stage. I didn't say it'd be microscopic. Wow. Okay.
This too.
Oh, this too. Okay, I'll take this one.
There you go.
Thank you. My name's Jack Hidary, CEO of Sandbox AQ. Great to be here today. All of us in this room are asset allocators. You might be a professional fund manager leading a wonderful investment fund, private sector, public equities. You might be an allocator, a CEO of a company, or a senior executive at a company. And each of us, of course, are allocating assets for ourselves in our own lives. So one thing we'll talk about at the end of this talk is a list of 40 questions to ask when you speak to managements of companies, when you speak to folks who say, we're using AI, yes, in our company we're using AI, we have made 40 questions to dig a little deeper. I used to run a public company, and I can tell, doing all the road shows I did with the buy side, they asked really good questions. And we made some really good questions for you to ask these kinds of management teams to make sure they're going beyond just the shallow area. So when you look at AI, a lot of what you hear, the majority, really, of what we hear today about companies using AI in the automotive sector, in the energy sector, in the consumer goods sector is, yes, we're using AI. We're creating lots of content more cheaply. We're using AI for customer service. We're reducing our call center costs, and we're using that. All good, all should be done. But really, that's only the surface. The penetrating question is, how are you using AI to transform the way you actually make your products, the way you deliver your products? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that takes us to LLMs, but beyond LLMs as well. So when we think about, I think we're going to queue up an animation now. I believe we have an animation. When we think about, thank you, about where this all came from. Last night, a company had blowout numbers. Who makes chips? What's the name of that company? NVIDIA, yes. Hopefully a lot of people here have stock and did very well today with that stock. So NVIDIA, one of the many makers of GPUs, many others as well now getting into the game. There'll be a lot of interesting competition there, but NVIDIA, the market leader today and for the foreseeable future. The G in GPUs, of course, graphics, making graphics better, and then, of course, getting us to LLMs, large language models. But what people do not realize yet is that these same GPUs will take us to whole new areas of AI as well. One thing you see in the animation is the use of GPUs for simulation. LLMs are really good when you have a lot of data. We download that data from the web, Wikipedia, Reddit, X, all kinds of sources of content. We train the AI model, and it has language fluency. Wonderful. But what if you don't have data? What if you want to create a new molecule? You're a drug company, you're a biotech company. What if you want to create a new material? An alloy, you want to lightweight your vehicle because you're an automotive company or an aerospace company. There is no data set to download from the internet. If there were, we'd already have that new material. And so we now need to go to a different kind of AI, an AI where we actually generate data. 2023, definitely the year of Gen AI, but 2024 starts the era of Gen data, generative data. We can create data using physics equations, the equations that govern how molecules interact, how chemistry interacts, to create simulations billions of times over of different battery chemistries, as an example. So we can create better batteries for EVs and for buildings. So LLMs, definitely lots and lots of use cases. You'll see them explode over the next few years, but a bigger tool set in the AI toolbox than just LLMs. We'll explore some of this right now. So when we look at life sciences, chemicals, finance, and logistics, lots of interesting applications. We know that the biopharma model is broken. We know that it takes, on average, 15 years to get a molecule to become a medicine. We know it takes $2.5 to $3 billion, and even with all that time and money, 90% failure in clinical trials. 90% of the drugs that go into a clinical trial never come out. So what do we do about that? Now, if we go to an LLM, a GPT, and say, what's the next drug for Alzheimer's? Give me the formula. Are we going to get a great answer? Probably not. Because that's the same GPT that when we say, what's the population of Mars, it tells us 2 billion because it read a science fiction novel. And so we need a different kind of AI that's going to help us in this area. And when we look at the pharma companies, and just from a financial analysis sense, looking at the bad golden triangle, that's not a good golden triangle, that's a bad one, where they're spending more on each new molecular entity, that's what an NME is, a new possible drug, than they are hoping to get in revenues for that NME. That's not a good place to be. Some, like Amgen and others, have moved to the right, but too many are spending more than allows for success in these areas. And that's why biopharma has become a very lumpy business, a hit-based business, one where most drugs fail, and the few that succeed, you have to charge so much to take care of all the losses. So in this particular case study, Stan Prusner, a Nobel Prize winner at UCSF, had an idea of a drug, and instead of taking the 13 to 15 years, instead of spending $2 billion, $3 billion, he used AI simulation software. Software that took his drug and ran it through millions and billions of simulations, each time changing the molecule slightly. Each time adding a carbon, taking away a methyl group, doing different things to it, and seeing what the binding would be, what the toxicity would be in a virtual human. And then, now that's going to clinic in under 1 year instead of 7, 8 years. And so, saving 7, 8 years, saving $2 billion, this is the transformational nature of AI simulation. We have to go beyond LLMs if we're gonna hit huge TAM sectors like biopharma. Let's talk about the chemicals industry. Here again, we have challenges. Most of the industry is below the ROIC line that we want. How do we change this? When we look at chemistries, we haven't changed many of these catalysts in decades. And again, it's because we lack the simulation tools. When you think about simulation, think about it, for example, for Airbus and Boeing. When they created the Boeing 777, when they created the Airbus A380, did they actually make clay models as the first step and put it in a physical wind tunnel? They did not. They actually simulated that in a simulation computer that did it millions and millions of times, making small changes, and then they made the first prototype. Now that's for fluid dynamics, that's for stuff in the big world. But for stuff in the chemicals world, in biopharma, and in also simulating the financial world, the risk analysis there, we need a very high-dimensional analysis that takes us outside of CFD. And this is what will transform the chemicals industry. You'll start hearing about this over the next few years. So again, if you have investments in the biopharma, in the chemical space, and other spaces we're talking about, this is the time to ask deeper questions. If you're invested in any of the automotive or aerospace companies, it is time to move beyond LLMs. Yes, great. If you have an automotive company, you should use LLMs for chatbots, for customer service. But are you using it to go beyond lithium-ion chemistry for batteries? Are you using it to lightweight your vehicle? Because a lighter vehicle, say half the weight, will go twice as far on the same battery. And so these are the kinds of breakthroughs that AI can give us when we go beyond just AI LLMs into the larger tool set. When we think now about financial services, so, okay, Jack, I get the physical world. I understand that. You have equations running on GPUs, the same NVIDIA GPUs, and then you find a data set, you create a data set, you apply deep learning to that, you train the model for a certain objective function, for lighter batteries or bigger power density, get that. But how do we apply it to financial services? Well, what we know, so for the last 18 months, is the near miss we had in terms of calamity in the banking sector. Did SVB and First Republic evade their stress test? No, they passed their tests. The problem is the tests are not good enough. The problem is that our economy has become so complicated, we now need higher dimensional simulation. So again, in financial services, we need to go beyond as well. Oh, sure. Just one last slide. So just finish up with the threat as well. Just like this, a lot of opportunity to create stuff in the area of AI, AI is also the greatest hacking tool. So what I leave you with then is the opportunity to share this free set of 40 questions, which I hope you'll email us about, which we're happy to share with this audience here, so that you can ask, if you just email that email address right there, so you can ask more penetrating questions as you talk to management teams, as you talk to companies, as you think about investing in AI yourself in your own company. These are the key questions we recommend asking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jack. Now we have an opportunity to dive into the quantumverse. And for this panel, we have the very esteemed Manny Medina of Medina Capital and Shervin Pishavar of Edison's Fund. Please join me in welcoming Manny and Shervin to the stage.
Hi, Say.
Hey, welcome, gentlemen. We're going to dive right in. And obviously, we've been building to this moment to talk about quantum. And Manny, I'd like to start with you and asking the very direct question, what phase is this technology in when we talk about quantum computing?
I mean, well, first of all, thank you, FII, for having me again here. But this is an early stage for quantum. But however, 10 years ago, when we had our first Emerge Americas, a conference that we do here that you know well, we had a gentleman by the name of Elias Khan from Cambridge Quantum 10 years ago, and he presented quantum. And 10 years ago, it was a long time. Right now, there hasn't been a tipping point for quantum yet. There was a tipping point for AI with ChatGPT, I believe, and all these technologies have this tipping point. What's really exciting, though, Saif, having invested in technology for a long time now, I've seen all these waves, right? Starting with the internet, then with the hypervisor, virtualization, cloud computing, mobility, everything that all these waves do two things. They basically deteriorate capital of legacy companies and create brand new companies with immense value, as you've just seen what's happened with GPT. This is probably the most exciting time that I have seen because of the combination of AI and quantum. I agree with Jack Hillary. Everything that he said, LLMs by themselves are not going to be enough. Everything that he says is coming. The only way you can get that done is if there's a paradigm shift away from the chip and into a whole new compute that brings the power of nature to create compute. And that's a firm belief of us. So I think right now what is also happening is you're seeing a massive race all over the world. This is a global race to see who wins this race. People talk about the Chinese, and they talk about the Russians, and they talk about us, and and et cetera. I got to tell you, I was just in Chile at the end of last year. The University of Concepcion, Chile, they now have 3 of the world-renowned physicists, and they are going to win the quantum war. So what I'm saying is, it's early stage, but the speed is very fast, massive amount of investment. Up to recently, all the amount that was invested in quantum was all government subsidized, either think tanks. Now there's private capital, like us, following and chasing quantum opportunities. So we believe that the quantum is real, is here, and you're going to see a very fast adoption as the technology matures, because it's still early in that stage. So.
Thank you, Manny. Shervin, backstage we were talking, and you shared some insights about the potential of this technology. Let's just jump right into that.
Absolutely, Saif. The impact on humanity, which is the theme of Priorities conference, is if you try to imagine the acceleration of history that's about to happen. Some of the companies that we look at, one is PsiQuantum, which is using photonics that came out of Cambridge University. I went and saw this working. This is using light, which solves the heat problem. But what it gets to is by 2032, they're going to get to 1 million qubits. Today it's like 5,000 qubits. 1 million qubits is basically the power of God. It's the mind of God. You can solve problems that would take us 1 billion years to solve, with our current compute cycles and power and capacity. You would be able to solve it in hours and days. What Manny's talking about is exactly right, which is we're aligned now in history where quantum technologies, quantum computing technologies, and AI are going to merge into one stream of technology platform. And it's going to accelerate not only the discovery of cures to every disease known to mankind, and this is not in 100 years, we're talking about the next 20, 25 years. And the impact just alone on our health care systems, on our lifespans, this is civilizational change. It's the beginning of a new world. This is why we've invested so deeply into quantum. Emil Michael and I created a SPAC called DPCM, and we took the oldest quantum computing company in the world, D-Wave, public 2 years ago. And the commercialization of quantum has just started since 2021. It's the first time that the products are now being sold to companies and governments. That impact is very exciting to see as we spread it. We also backed IonQ, which is the largest quantum computing company and the first one to go public. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I do want to touch on one more thing, but I'll let you, which is this, the sovereign supremacy, the impact on governments. Is another area we can definitely touch on.
We've only have time for one quick follow-up, which is really for both of you, and I'll ask Manny to answer it first, which is, what types of questions are investors like you asking of quantum founders right now? And Shervin, I would love for you to sound in on that.
Yeah, so look, a lot of this, we're seeing a lot of the brand new is what we're focusing in, right, basically. And a lot of the questions that we're asking, there's a lot of government help that has been given, accreditations. I mean, I saw Klaus here, who heads the incubator for NATO. One of the startups that we are looking at investing in, they were certified by NATO. So what kind of certifications have they gotten so far? Or is it just home brewed, or have they had kind of validation from outside groups that have kind of tested? Because you can't go up and say, give me your revenue run rate or how many customers do you have. It's really all about the technology. So how valid and how proven is the technology? How much has it been validated by outside groups that give you the sense of confidence? And also, you know, there's a lot of very large enterprises and governments that become guinea pigs in accepting and adopting the technology, which is really important. So a lot of them do have technology working in enterprises and government agencies that basically are checking if that is the case, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Manny. Shervin, last word. What questions are you asking? What questions should investors be asking quantum founders right now?
I mean, specifically, the biggest idea in this space for me has been searching for the founders and the researchers who are trying to build the combination of quantum computing and AI into even the chipset itself. So imagine an NVIDIA that is quantum and AI combined into one computing platform, and then put that on a cloud service and accelerate history that way. So we're searching far and wide to see which founders and which companies are working on this synthesis of quantum and AI.
Please join me in thanking Manny and Shervin for their insights on quantum computing. Sure. This was just a fantastic discussion. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now,
thank you, Saif.
And now back over to Etna.
Okay, thank you so much. And now it is my time to go back on stage. But before I go back, we're going to have the investors up here. Now, it's not every day that we get Sanibel Investments, SoftBank, 8VC, and Vision Equity Partners. We've got all of these people coming on stage. So I expect all of you, who did we have here? Adrian, Amir, Caroline, Anthony, Patty. There's got to be something you need to talk to these people about. There's got to be a few $1 billion you still could do something with. So please, be ready to just engage with them. And again, to our dear audience, Saif has been busy, but I'm going to put him to work now and maybe get some questions from you. But please, we don't have this opportunity that often. And I know it's a little bit different at the FII, but this is your show as well. So we really want to make sure that you are involved. So let me get my panel out here. This is the investment panel, really navigating the AI ecosystems. How are we going to pay for all of this? And again, who is? And again, what do the investors want? So let's see. Hopefully they're standing by and ready to go and ready to engage. From Sanibel Investments, Hani Anaya is with us. He is the CIO of Sanibel Investments. Hani, I'm going to put you here beside me. Navi Govil is with us. He is from SoftBank Vision Fund, the executive managing partner and the CFO. Lovely to see you, Navi. Thank you. You can do it. We're close to the end of the day. Joe Lonsdale joins us, the managing partner from 8VC. And here's Robert Smith, the founder and chairman and CEO of Vista Equity Partners. If these guys don't have the answers, we are in trouble. Super. Thank you all so much. And as I said, I'm hoping that we get some engagement from our dear audience here. Hani, talk to me. We have heard throughout the day, and we've heard even earlier this morning from the chairman of PIF2 talking about the great opportunities that are there for AI. It's been throughout the day and everybody's theme. I don't think we got through a panel without mentioning it. But talk to me about the sort of potential that you see for AI as, for the investment focus.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And it's great to be here as always. So AI will definitely be world-changing. There is no doubt about this. However, I would say there is lots of uncertainty How will this happen, and who will capture most of the value created by AI? I mean, for example, you look at across the AI stack, you look at the base of the AI stack, it's basically a monopoly. It's ASML selling to TSMC, manufacturing for NVIDIA, and it's amazing for them, right? And amazing for the whole AI stack. You go to the top of the AI layer, I would say it's a commodity when it comes to LLM models and all these applications. There is not enough mode today that makes me think that there is like a clear value capture there. But what I'm certain about and what we are certain about, companies who will figure out how to leverage AI in their sectors will be the future market leaders. So given all of the above, our approach is to look holistically at the AI landscape and to invest fast and patiently over the next decade or two and building a careful portfolio construction across all the layers.
Fast and patiently, huh?
Yes.
So I like that. Patient capital is something everybody could do with too. Naveed, we look at SoftBank, and really, you've had sort of the ability many times, to be ahead of trends, when it comes to investments. AI really shouldn't be any different, and you're right there. What advice do you give to, other investors to capitalize on the potential, and where do you see it going?
Thanks, Etna. Speaking of being ahead of trends, our founder, Masayoshi Son, has this remarkable ability to see around corners. So over the last 4 decades, very quickly, he saw the PC revolution, and in 1981 founded SoftBank to distribute software. Then we had the internet revolution, and he was one of the early investors in Alibaba. And then during the mobile revolution, he partnered with Steve Jobs to introduce the iPhone in Japan. And this was many years before it was introduced in the United States. So in 2016, he saw the emergence of artificial intelligence and believed that the core, the power of artificial intelligence is going to come from computing power. So we acquired ARM in 2016. And then in 2017, we launched the Vision Fund, our $100 billion Vision Fund in partnership with the PIF and many others, to really capitalize on the artificial intelligence. And over the last 7 years, we've invested $160 billion in over 475 companies. So where we are today is we're going from the age of computing to the age of artificial intelligence. But age of computing this is where machines would calculate, search, memorize, to the age of AI, which is to create and infer. And we're very excited about this. So to your question, when we look at investing in companies, we look for strong AI leadership, quality of the tech stack, strong product market fit, a track record of execution, and sustainable financial performance.
And if they can deliver that, then they've got a good partner. Joe, when we look at it, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around, and many investors probably feeling a bit challenged within all this. AI investment at the minute, probably not for the faint-hearted. What would you advise?
I think it's going to be beneficial to a couple groups of companies. There's been a lot of SaaS companies built the last 15 years. In my side, I start companies and we invest early. And if you look at the last time after the cloud and after big data was possible, we probably have 300 or 400 really big SaaS companies created. A lot of them created and built and scaled by people like Robert, his firm. But we were involved in a few dozen of those. And I think pretty much all of those that are doing well now are also going to be accelerated and do a lot better thanks to AI for a lot of obvious reasons. And then the other question is, what else can you do as a builder of companies right now? And when we were building these SaaS companies, we were kind of, it's almost like being bullies because you're going after these pre-internet companies that don't know how to do tech at all, and you're taking away things based on what's possible. The question is, what's left? There's not a lot of new areas for SaaS to go, but there are a lot of companies in the US that are services companies that suddenly, thanks to AI, you can build SaaS plus AI plus operations, and you can compete against them and do things with much higher margins. And so I think not only is this going to help a lot of SaaS companies, but there's going to be trillions of dollars of value created going after and fixing and replacing a lot of services areas in the US as well.
Robert, let's have a look at the challenges, because that's kind of what makes the headlines, right? We haven't seen a headline that says AI is so easy to understand and we're all going to have a great time in this great new future. We don't see that yet. Hopefully we will. And again, a lot of players involved, the corporate investors, the VCs, private equity, public funders, all different people have to navigate this. How can they actually capitalize on it? What do you think?
There's going to be a series of waves of opportunity. The first wave we're experiencing now, which is really, hardware, right? And you're going to have your chipsets, your infrastructure, and they're going to express, I don't know, probably $2, $3, $5, $8 billion of value creation over the next 18 to 24 months. The next wave will be these hyperscalers. Now, there's hyperscalers that exist today. Our sense is it's going to be multiples of 3 to 5 times what you see in the hardware expression. And there's going to be new hyperscalers. There are ambitious sovereigns. There are ambitious companies who are saying, I want to be the next hyperscaler, the deliverer of this GPU or TPU capacity to instances, geographies, industries to support the use of generative AI solution sets. And then the next wave will be the enterprise software folks. So look, a small, medium-sized company, not necessarily individual, but company, will likely not be investing in building it themselves. They're going to rely on their enterprise software vendors to deliver solutions to them at scale that evolve. Because as these tool sets, these LLMs, evolve, they're going to need to they're going to want to have the latest and greatest implementations of these Gen AI solution sets. Now, the interesting thing about it is the risk comes from if you actually do not have sovereignty and dominion over the data sets, okay, that's where you create risk of, leaking all of your intellectual property into, models and systems that can destroy value for the company that you may own. So one of the first things to do, which of course we started, years ago, was building that capacity. And from there, as Joe talked about, then you can build on top of that. Some of them are cloud native, some not so much, but the cloud native, you build the Gen AI enabled solution sets. Now you have 2 different ways to play this. One way is new product solutions that you can now sell to your customers, increase your market share. One of our companies, to give an example, the estimate is our Gen AI solutions can increase their revenues by now over 50 times what they're currently doing based on the utility, i.e. what is the ROI of the products that they sell to their customer. 50 times, not 50%, 50 times. That's the sort of magnitude that you see. The other set is, of course, how do you generate and write this code more efficiently? Code assist. We've implemented now Code Assist. I think it's 94% of our companies. We're seeing between 10 and 25% productivity by individual coder. So if you think about that, now you can use that as a way to either decrease your cost, increase your profit margins, or increase the number of developers that you have on staff for the same price to actually accelerate your growth. So there's multiple ways to play this. But if you get a few of these things wrong, there's huge risk. But if you get a few of these right, massive equity upside opportunity as an investor.
I hope you're following this because it's moving fast. I'm not sure everybody's ahead of it. Do we have any questions for our audience? Caroline, I know you had talked a lot about the importance of data. Anything you want to put to our dear panel here? Yeah. Any microphone here? And we've got a microphone standing by. All right. Oh, plenty of them. There we go. Thank you, thank you. We should be ready to go.
How do you view, the data itself is what drives the model and creates the value. And there are a few groups that really have crown jewels data and other people sort of circling around them, trying to build models on it. How do you navigate that in terms of understanding what's really intrinsic value in the data that can be built upon?
I'll speak to it from an enterprise perspective.
Sorry, Robert.
And then you can talk.
Go ahead, but think about coming in on this.
Yeah, from an enterprise perspective, one of the advantages is, as you are working with customers, you may have 10,000, 20,000 customers. Their data sets or information is actually going through your workflow. So now you actually have created a unique data set that you can now use to create additional products and solutions and services. That's the advantage of being an enterprise class, provider of software. That's how you approach it. Now, the question, of course, is, what do you do as a consumer? Because we give our data free, and we have. Are we going to get paid for it? Is there monetization opportunities, or is it just going to be turned back or some additional products that we continue to consume? Those are for the consumer folks who have to think about it. But from an enterprise perspective, that's the important part of it, is that sovereignty and dominion of data that you have treated. You've had some action on that data that's now created a unique data set that you can now use and put various forms of models on. Quite frankly, some of these LLMs, they don't need to be anywhere near that size for the data sets for the use for specific industries. And so that creates a whole nother productivity opportunity because it's not going to be as costly, not use as much compute, nor as much power, but give similar utility in the products that we develop.
That's why I started with 500 unicorns, give or take, that have been built in these different subsectors. Each of them has unique data and understanding of workflows and operations. And OpenAI may have tons of consumer and web data, they probably don't know how to tailor healthcare billing to the thousands of insurance companies that each have tens of thousands of codes and a very complex workflow. That's probably going to come from some of these top SaaS companies.
Naveed, do you have anything to add on this one, a quick one?
Sure. I think one sector that comes to mind is warehouse automation. So we have 3 portfolio companies there, Symbotic, AutoStore, and Berkshire Grey. So they use the data, as you're saying, and process it through machine learning and robotics. And what they've been able to do is reduce the physical footprint of warehouses by over 60% and increase operating efficiency 9 times, sort of what Robert was talking about in terms of software, where you see 50 times improvement.
OK, we got another question coming up. And we've got one in the front, Patty's here. We got another one waiting here. Good.
Yeah, quick one building on what was said this morning about Saudi Arabia in this. How many AI unicorns from Saudi Arabia are going to be here at this conference next year?
Ooh, Hani, you want to handle that one? Too many to list right now. But
I can't predict the timeline, but I believe there are a few in the making, definitely. And to build on that, I believe in Saudi Arabia we are well positioned to be a global AI leader, and that's driven by the enormous political will, access to talent, tech investments, and also like Saudi Arabia enjoying one of the lowest energy generation costs, not only at fossil fuel-based energy, but also at renewable. So by building energy efficient or sustainable data centers in the kingdom and the region, and also investing and developing energy efficient hardware and AI hardware, I believe we can develop like a very massive ecosystem in the kingdom.
Patty, you got a question.
Yeah.
Direct it to one person if you can, because we really want to keep them moving.
No, thank you. So Hani has already sort of gone down that road. So my question to the rest of you was going to be...
One at a time, help me.
To you. So all the focus has been, and even in this conversation, has been about investing in companies that are using the data, that are using the AI, advancing, improving. But without the AI delivering that through infrastructure, you won't get there.
Yes.
Okay? So that's where the big constraint is going to be. And there has been not many takers come rushing forward to invest in that infrastructure. And we're going to need that infrastructure at a massive scale. Huge amount. So what we have been investing in infrastructure at like $1 billion is going to now need to be $5 billion because we're going to have to add energies. Now, Saudi Arabia has figured that out, and you just now partly answered that question by saying we're going to focus on building that infrastructure capacity.
So how do we fill that gap? Who do you want to do? Robert?
Yeah.
And the other guys, be ready to come in quick.
Again, when you're living in a world of the enterprise and you have a data set, this data set, it might be a data set of, again, 10,000 customers, not 5 billion individuals. So we don't need the same amount of compute, don't need the same amount of power, don't need the same amount of infrastructure. So then it's just a question of, can you actually get the capacity? So when you add all of our companies up, we're 4th or 5th largest enterprise software company in the world. So I can actually go get capacity from the existing hyperscalers and not have to wait for the newer hyperscalers or for their capacity to actually come on stream. That's how we approach it. Everyone has to take it based on, you have a set of cards, you deal with what you have in front of you. Ours exists in a specific and discrete instances of companies that we already own, already control, and utilize that capacity, and then utilize, I'll use it, the girth of our overall infrastructure to get the capacity, enable our companies to be successful in that context.
Joe, Naveed?
In my experience, the big tech companies are putting tens of billions of dollars to work to create infrastructure right now. I'm glad they're doing it. I wouldn't want to compete with Google or Oracle or other companies doing that layer. I wouldn't want to compete with NVIDIA myself. And if you go to San Francisco, there's massive numbers of groups doing software infrastructure to complement their hardware infrastructure. So I agree infrastructure is very valuable. I guess my experience is that it is a very popular thing that a lot of my friends are working on in the core of the AI world.
Naveed, do you have anything to add, or we'll move on?
Sure. So I think in terms of infrastructure, it's 2 things. There's economic development, and then in the AI revolution, it's what Robert and Joel have been talking about. It's compute infrastructure. Therefore, we say at SoftBank, everything runs on ARM. There are 280 billion ARM designed chips globally, and they're including in 99% of all smartphones. And then in terms of infrastructure, we just announced a partnership 2 days ago in Saudi Arabia with Alat. And then there's a lot of economic development as well. Regions that come to mind are India, where our portfolio has been doing extremely well through significant economic development.
Okay, with this lady here. Directed question, if you can, to one person. We're running out of time. I'd really appreciate it. And then Jack, I think, at the back. Please, ma'am.
Hi,
Go ahead.
my name is Tisha Jebsen, True Bearing Diagnostics and EarthGrid. I have a question about the data. So everyone who keeps talking about how wonderful this is going to be with AI delivering wonderful answers based on this data that's being collected, but what if the data is crap? So for example, with genetic sequencing, it's a 30% variance rate. If you're looking for diagnostics that are accurate, you're not going to achieve it with the technology that's there today. And if AI is building on that technology, what do we do? How do we adjust? I have that answer to a certain degree, but what is your answer?
Who can take that?
Well, we're doing a lot. I think it's a great question. We do a lot in bioinfrastructure. We do a lot in health services. And in both of those areas, there's a lot of really, really bad data. It's not just that it's messy, it's that it's wrong, it's that it's incomplete. And partially what we're trying to do is use AI to get better data. I think there's a lot of good companies who are able, I mean, you really should have an AI be able to listen and watch everything that happens in a doctor's appointment and hopefully get more context. You should be able to have AI actually look and be part of the bioinfrastructure tools themselves. So I have seen a lot of really smart people working on using AI and using tools to make the data better. And I think because we can use this data better now, it's going to actually create accountability for people, because once you do get that right, it creates a lot of value. But I agree it's a hard problem. I do think it's one that AI itself hopefully helps us work on.
I just got time for one more question because we're running out of time. Make it a good one, Jack.
Great. My question is on AI skilling. Right now, very few people are creating 99% of all the AI, both at AI companies and inside other companies. How do we widen the base of people who know these skills to create AI, to use AI, both from a global South perspective, and love to hear from Hani on that, and the wider perspective, but also within the US. Robert, love to hear you on that. Thank you.
Okay, that's going to be our closing question, so we're line from each of you. Keep in time, there's a clock moving up there. Yeah. Hani, kick it off for us. Everybody talk direct to that, please. Just less than a minute, or less than 30 seconds. Go.
No, definitely. This is like a great challenge, but I believe AI will be one of the biggest enablers for actually scaling the AI skill set, if that makes sense.
Okay, Naveed.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a rapidly changing technology, and current disruptors themselves may be disrupted. So absolutely.
So my answer is you don't have to. The world's always created by 1% of the most talented people, but the productivity and the other things this does for the world in terms of benefiting everyone is so big that it's okay that only a small number of people are going to be able to actually build most of it, but that will all benefit from that.
Robert, words of inspiration. Take us home.
It is important to create on-ramps. To give you an example, what we've done with one of our companies, Stats Perform, largest database for software or for sports in the world by a factor of 10. We created an AI curriculum, and we implemented it at Morehouse College last fall. And so part of what we're going to do is drive it into communities who do not have access so they can learn, enable, and they can become part of the solution set and part of the developer community.
And we're out on time. What a record. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Hani, Naveed, Joe, Robert, what a joy. Thank you all so much. And to our dear audience, see, it's a bit of fun if I can get you all moving and involved. So particularly tomorrow, too, we'll really try and move on the questions. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. We have some great speakers coming, believe me. We're going to take a look at intellectual property. This is something that you all need to be watching. You need to know very, very carefully here. John Quinn, the founder and chairman of Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan, is with us. So, John, come out here and
thank you.
Inspire us. Thank you so much. Please don't leave. And the people at the back, come up to the front. Please come join us in the front here. We've just got a few more people to go through. You won't want to miss the last messages of the evening. John, I'm handing to you.
Thank you. When we think about AI and IP, there's so many issues that have not been resolved in the law now. The courts are dealing with novel issues that they haven't struggled with. Let's begin with the very idea of, with all these billions of dollars of investments that are going into AI, how are they protected from an IP standpoint? You might think, well, they'll just be patented. But that's not necessarily true. You cannot patent an algorithm. You cannot patent a mathematical technique. You cannot patent a data set or some way of manipulating data. That is not patentable. I'm not talking about the hardware, the NVIDIA chips. Obviously, you can patent that. So how do you protect all these investments that are going into AI? I think the answer to this is going to be an increased reliance on trade secrets, a different way of protecting information. A patent, you file something with the patent office, you get something back with a ribbon, it lasts for 20 years, but only 20 years. You have to disclose it to the world. with trade secrets, as long as you keep your know-how, what you're doing, your special sauce, confidential, and as long as it has value by virtue of the fact that it's not generally known, you can protect it indefinitely. You have to police that. You have to make sure that you keep it confidential and it stays trade secret. So those NDA agreements, all those things really do matter. But how about inventions by AI? So much of the invention that's being done now is being done by AI. You look at the Google Mind, and I saw something where they had discovered something like 2 million new crystals, which have all different applications. This was created by AI. AI is discovering materials, processes, and the like. But guess what? The Patent Office takes the position, as does every country in the world except South Africa, as I understand it, that inventions made by AI are not patentable. AI cannot be an inventor. So what does this mean? If so many things are being created by AI and it can't be patented, maybe patents become irrelevant. I mean, so we don't know this interaction between intellectual property law and patent law, where that's going to end up. Another issue relating to data and data sets is scraping. You know, so much of the AI is powered by large volumes of data which bots take down from the web. Now, the web hosters aren't necessarily happy about that. There's been cases brought by LinkedIn and brought by Meta trying to stop people from scraping. So far, the scrapers have been winning those cases. But I think this is going to be a battle back and forth on terms of the terms of service and the like. But the web hosts are not the only ones who have an issue with scraping. People have an issue. Their information is being taken and scraped. Now you might say, well, you put it out there in public, you put it on the website, how could you possibly have any privacy interest? But what we're seeing, and it's getting some traction in the courts, is, yes, I put it out there, I put it in the public domain, but I never anticipated that somebody would scrape it and make this other use of it, that they would monetize it, and they would get some benefit from it. I never consented to that. So we're seeing those types of claims, the issues about privacy. So scraping continues to be a very, very hot issue, and we're going to learn more about how the law develops there. You've all seen the cases relating to copyright and generative AI, the New York Times versus OpenAI, Sarah Silverman, visual artists, musical artists, who are objecting that basically they have two kinds of objections. One, you know, the input that you're training these data sets using proprietary copyrighted material, and that's an infringement, or that the output is an infringement, what's coming out the other end. The defense is, you know, on the input side is really just that, look, this all happens in the, you know, under the hood, nobody sees this, and it's what's termed under copyright law. The argument is that's a fair use. In other words, what's a fair use? It's a very technical doctrine, but the idea is basically that, you know, if you're not inhibiting creativity, you know, if you're not eliminating the market for copyrighted works, it's okay. It's a fair use of copyrighted material. We don't really have any decisions on this yet. You've read about them, but the courts have got to address this issue. On the output side, you don't really see OpenAI or other generative AI companies, the output, which is substantially similar to the copyrighted work, and that's the test for infringement. Once in a while it happens, you'll see something that's, you know, very much like a copyrighted literary work or visual image, and as I understand, the generative AI companies have a difficult time explaining how that happens sometimes. But these are all issues that are going to have to be worked out. The copyright issue, the scraping issues. Another issue relates to, that's open-ended, is products liability. In 2018, a Uber car hit a person who was jaywalking. Now, the driver wasn't paying attention. The driver, you know, was an autonomous car. The driver was on their phone. Who's at fault under traditional products liability laws? Is it the manufacturer of the car? Is it the engineer? Is it the AI itself? Well, the state of Arizona charged that driver with negligent homicide, so they made at least a judgment that far, but it really remains to be seen. These products liability issues and how they're going to play out, these all very much remain to be decided. A lot of these are going to end up being decided, I think, in regulation. We're probably not going to see, my guess, national legislation in this country coming out of Washington. How many of you think there is a national law on privacy in the United States of America? There isn't one. Couldn't get it together, can't get it out of the committee. How many of you think there's a national law regulating social media? For all the time we've been wringing our hands about the potential problems with social media. So it's happening in the states. Something like half the states now have some type of regulation of AI, mostly directed towards use of data sets and concerns that data sets might be biased in terms of making employment decisions, or who gets a loan, or who gets an apartment, and things like that. Deep fakes also have gotten attention in state houses in states across the United States. Law enforcement and use of AI, facial recognition, those are all of interest. But I don't think we're going to see national legislation. But what we are going to have is a comprehensive AI law coming out of the EU. The EU AI Act, which they've been working on for about 3 years, is on the verge of being officially adopted. And I think, like the GDPR, the way the GDPR set a global standard for privacy, I think that European AI Act is going to set a global standard for AI. This has been termed by some people a Brussels effect. Brussels gets out in front. Nobody's going to have, no major company is going to have a different policy in Europe than they're going to have in North America, or they're going to have in Asia or elsewhere. So they end up, by default, complying with what comes out of Brussels. So I think that's the regulation we're going to see. If I were giving this talk a year from now, I'd have some answers to some of these questions. The courts are going to make decisions. Things are changing so fast. The legal system, which is, in the best of times, is not fast. It's struggling to keep up and deal with these new concepts under old legal labels. Thank you.
John, thank you. And again, fascinating look at what's happening. This is very much part of, our alignment side of this, really looking at what we need to do in the industry. And a few worrying things there, but again, a lot for us to look forward to in terms of intellectual property. Be aware, make sure you guard it. With your life, pretty much, because that's what's happening. Still a lot of uncertainty in the sector. Again, we have lots more to do. We have Josh Harris coming up now, Executive Vice President of Palantir Technologies. And Josh is going to be talking about workforce development. And stay with us. We have government and ethics to follow on that. Josh, you're here. Stage is yours.
So I've been asked to talk about AI and the impact that it may or may not have on the workforce, which historically, I think, really has been at what point are robots going to take over for all of us and we can go home, get fatter, watch Netflix, and sort of the world ends. Sadly, for me at least, except on the fatter part, I don't think that that's happening just yet. I think that we're still required. And I'll tell you why I think that. So imagine AI is a spoiled, really excited, really smart intern. And you've just hired this intern, and they're super motivated, and they've read everything, but they have no idea what your business does. They have no context on business operations, and they have no industry expertise whatsoever. So what you need to do, like in the case of AI, is you essentially need to harness. You need to provide guardrails. You need to provide context on the data and how systems work. And that's why we believe that essentially AI will always, even though AI will get better and it will be smarter, it will always require guardrails, which essentially in this case means us, humans. A few examples of this, and there's some precedent that I discovered, which I found interesting. One is when Microsoft Excel came out in the late 1990s, apparently the accounting world went bananas because they thought that this was the end of accountants forever. I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen an irate room of accountants, but it's not something that I imagine is very fun. And they thought that they had no more jobs and that they were going to be replaced by Excel. What actually happened in this particular case was, one, they got more efficient. They were able to use the technology, which you could equate to today's AI, to get rid of a lot of the grunt work, the paperwork, the manual calculations, all of the things that could be automated at the time. They were allowed to take on more clients and more workload. You also were able to give the employees who came to work to be accountants the actual work that they wanted to do, which was to be accountants and not some of the other work. So what did you see at accounting firms? You saw actually an increase in the workforce. You saw increased customer or employee satisfaction and retention, and you saw, and to this day, higher profitability for the accounting firms. So what was viewed at the time as this great fear of the apocalypse of accountants, which is a funny sort of thing to think about, turned out not to be true. Take that forward to a modern day application of this and look at what happened at a customer of ours, Airbus. 2016, Airbus contacts us. They have a major problem with their backlog on the A350, and basically they're at risk of hundreds of millions of dollars of fines if they don't make it in time. Imagine a group of young Silicon Valley engineers showing up in Toulouse, basically telling people who are best in class in their field, engineers, how to do their job. But what we did was we used AI tooling to take what they were really good at, help automate and systematize the parts that were cumbersome, and allow them to be good at what they do while eliminating the parts they didn't want to do. And so what happened in a year? We were able to, one, help Airbus save several hundred millions of dollars, but two, while initially the Workers' Council and everyone was sort of fundamentally against us, we became kind of the champion of this group because we allowed these people who had not gone to school to fill out form after form and PDF, but they came and they were actually allowed to do the thing they wanted to do. So, and if you look now, so that was 2016, if you look at 2024, 40% of Airbus employees, they have 340,000 employees, 40% are using AI tools. Most of these people, if not a very small minority of these people, have any sort of computer science or any other background. These are generalists, these are engineers, these are safety experts. But AI has become so accessible in the way it's been tooling. Think about your iPhone. Think about the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that incorporate AI that you don't even think about. So when we talk about AI removing jobs, actually, I think, and we think at Palantir, that it sort of enables people to do the jobs they actually set out to do, and not the jobs that they sort of have to do because technologies didn't exist. So, there's not all good news. I think there will be businesses where you will see either employees leaving because the proper technologies aren't being adopted, or I think you will see a certain type of business model, which you're seeing already, and not to knock anyone in the room, but consulting, for example. There's a lot of any business that's charging for man hours or for individuals. I think you will see reductions in staff, reductions in headcount, because people are getting smart to that. They don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to pay for that anymore. And on the employee side, I think what you're also going to see is if you're, let's say, a nurse, most hospitals, and we work at over 20% of hospitals in the United States, a nurse handover process. A nurse did not go to nursing school to spend an hour and a half at the end of every day to do handovers and documentation in old software that doesn't really work, that was bought 5 to 8 years ago. So what you're seeing is the organizations that don't adapt and the organizations that don't allow their employees to focus on things that they're good at, letting a nurse be a nurse, letting an aviation engineer be an aviation engineer, I think are the ones that are going to fail. And I think you'll see this both in corporates, I think you'll see this in governments. I think that governments who harness the correct AI strategies and enable the employees, their employees and their workers, and also civic society to use and benefit from these tools are going to be the ones that win. And in this global climate, I think it's important to focus on how to win. And I think harnessing the tools that we have available to us and understanding and not being afraid of them is definitely a way to win. Thank you.
Josh, thank you. And also to John. Now we have our last session of the day, which is focused on ethics and governance. And we're going to jump right into it. So please join me in welcoming to our stage Caroline Yap, who's the Managing Director of Global AI Business at Google. Welcome. And Dr. Yang, the Vice Chairman of CTH Group and Atlas Technology. Please, welcome. Thank you.
So we've had an exciting afternoon in our AI town hall, and now it's time to dig in on ethics and governance. And so who better than two leaders like both of you to help guide us in this conversation? And I'm going to start with the big, very broad question, and I'll begin with you, Carolyn, and then I'll jump to Dr. Yang. And the question is, do our policymakers actually understand AI sufficiently enough to draft regulations that will keep businesses and public safe? And how are AI developers, on the other side, keeping up with the regulatory debate and laws? So,
I think it's a mix. You know, there are some policymakers who are a little bit more au fait because they're either using it or they have family members who are using it and they've heard a thing or two. I actually think that overall, all policymakers could probably do more to understand why people are using it, what it is that they're looking for, what it is they're trying to solve, instead of just trying to tackle it from a technology perspective. And then the experience piece being the key, because different constituents from different parts of the country, if we were to just even use North America as an example, the East Coast and the West Coast are the ones who are more familiar with the tech, but then you have Middle America who they may not even be necessarily doing online shopping yet, which is very fascinating considering, you know, the industries that drive a lot of the growth in the economy here. And so I think a better primer on what's happened since all of these generative AI things have come, and walk them through, here's what's really changed and why the policies matter. And the policy should be also focused on data and data education, not just necessarily about the generative AI aspects and why it's scary. It's more, how do we teach our citizens to be data-centric and data-first to then understand the implications on AI?
I appreciate that focus back on data literacy. And Dr. Yang, you've been engaged in this area for a very long time. Do you have a take on where policymakers might be at right now in understanding the most germane issues around AI?
First of all, it's nice to be back with you on your panel, Sif. Last year here at FI Miami, we talked about the intersection of two very powerful technologies, blockchain and AI. So in terms of your question, I think the government, regulators, they will be always behind the curve. Just look at what happened to blockchain, crypto industry. But in terms of the governance issue, I think there's three things we really have to look at today. Number one is the concentration of power. And number two, a fair and open access to AI. And the third is the problem of the infrastructure, computing infrastructure bottleneck. And very fortunately, I think blockchain offers a solution, a path forward. I mean, in terms of concentration power, I'm mindful to my fellow panelists here, her perspective, but I think it's an important issue. And in terms of the access, whether it's developed nation restrict certain countries, certain citizens access to the chips, to the cloud service, or authoritarian government restrict its own citizens to access AI, that's going to create a gap between haves and have-nots. In terms of the bottleneck of infrastructure right now, there is a shortage of chips, but at the same time, there are a lot of GPUs and graphics cards sitting idle. For example, in this time, early days in Asia, there are a lot of game console, in the game cafe sitting idle. So to solve all those three problems, we're one of the largest computing infrastructure provider to blockchain. So we team up with a team coming out of MIT. So we just developed a platform, a blockchain decentralized platform that would completely cannot be controlled by one entity. So we'll be able to schedule in the job, computation, validation, and the incentives. So it's really focused on solve the computation issue and the access issue, which is something we think is very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yang. And I want to, as we know, this FII Priorities is all about impact on humanity. That's one of our underlying conversation topics. And Caroline, I want to come back to you and touch upon, I don't want to go with the concentration of power question, but rather, who is rising to the challenge of ensuring workers have the right skills to thrive in an AI-driven economy? And then, what would be your recommendations for educators and respective regulatory bodies and businesses to ensure that the current and the next generation of workers are empowered? Let's talk about the people piece of where things are headed.
I really like what you're saying here because, to touch on my earlier point, which is around the experiences, right? And so if you're a regulator and you're not experiencing what people are doing, how can you recommend what the next steps are? And so I also like that you bring up educators. I think there's a massive gap in what technologies and what training is even available to educators today because their students are actually going to surpass them when it comes to knowledge. We saw this same problem when we did the whole thing with Common Core as a new curriculum here in the States, right? And so the teachers didn't know how to support the students who were moving to Common Core because they hadn't been taught Common Core themselves. The parents hadn't been taught Common Core themselves. So you actually have now educators, TAs, teaching assistants, as well as parents, needing to learn about these things around AI so that they can actually support this next generation who are also going to be coming to the workforce. So I think there's a couple of elements. Schools, educational bodies, I'll talk about google.org. We have that, and it's got free public training for all the way from children up. So it's not just about learning how to be a computer scientist, it's also learning how to be a socially responsible, digital citizen and using the technologies. But it takes more than just Google to do this, right? We need other bodies who are also willing to not just contribute the content, but to ensure that it gets into the right hands of people in a meaningful way. So public-private partnerships is another key way to be able to get that, but with measurable impact. Right? And so I think some of the things that we've talked about with the FII, especially around the priorities, one of which is the social inclusivity and things like that, is how do we ensure that they are also skilled, people are also skilled. And it has to be driven by, like you said, the Ministry of Education or something like that to get people to be more savvy around the technologies so that when they do enter the workforce, there's already some skill sets to know how to use these things. I really liked what Josh said earlier about Excel. Right, how people panicked when that was the case. I think it's the same thing now. Education is going to be the key for people to actually make use of these technologies in a meaningful way for the betterment of society.
I love that. As a parent of a 16-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter, my kids actually do a talk where they go into other schools talking about Gen AI for Gen Z. And it's important, and I like the idea of broadening the access of this information and that it takes those public-private partnerships. And Dr. Yang, you touched upon something that we can't have a conversation about AI ethics and governance without actually circling around how serious is the risk of AI knowledge and resources concentrating to the hands of just a very few?
I think it could be very dangerous. And also, actually, it's not very healthy, too, right? If you think about in the past, for example, even in the computer history itself, in the late 80s or 90s, Japanese government plus the leading Japanese conglomerates, they put so much resources into developing supercomputers, right? And that time, I remember I was doing research. We were super scared that they're going to, just those a few big companies is going to take over. But actually turned out to be, the IBM, the microprocessor, Microsoft, being more open model prevailed. And as a result, the leading Japanese technology companies failed badly. So I think in terms of have more transparent, open, decentralized way going forward, maybe a very viable path. And also, in terms of the education, I think there is a lot of anxiety, even for people in this room, for fear to be missed out by the AI transformation. But if we build a more open, transparent, decentralized network, everybody can participate, everybody can contribute. It's like a Uber driver, except the new system will be better because it will be more transparent in terms of the cost and the benefits.
Thank you so much. We only have a minute more. And Caroline, I'd like to come back to you and ask if you had, in 280 characters, to share with our friends in the audience as well as everybody watching on the live stream, what is the single most important piece of advice that you can give on how we can all be a leader and not a lagger on this issue of AI alignment? What would those 280 characters be?
Use Gemini. And of course, we open source Gemma, so it really touches on what Dr. Yang is also saying about an open ecosystem. Google's always been part of that. And so I would say use Gemini, test Gemma. If you have young children and they're interested in science, have them go to the GitHub repos and just experiment. Start to actually use it and be part of that journey. Don't be afraid.
Thank you both. I love that final word of experimentation. And please join me in giving a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so very much.